So please hit that subscribe button, because this story about respect, preparation, and the consequences of arrogance deserves to reach everyone who needs to learn these lessons. It's a cold Tuesday morning in February, and Providence Municipal Court is buzzing with unusual energy. Word has spread through the legal community that something big might happen today. Attorney Marcus Wellington, a 32-year-old Harvard Law graduate who recently moved to Providence from Manhattan, is representing the plaintiff in what should be a routine contract dispute case. But those who know Wellington from his New York days understand that he never does anything routine. He's built his reputation on aggressive tactics, media manipulation, and an inflated ego that stems from his belief that his Ivy League education makes him superior to what he calls local courthouse judges. For weeks, Wellington has been telling anyone who would listen at downtown Providence law firms that he's going to show this TV judge how real law works. He's studied Judge Caprio's cases, watched hours of Caught in Providence, and convinced himself that the judge's compassionate approach is actually legal weakness that can be exploited. Wellington's strategy is calculated and cruel: create a confrontation on live television, demonstrate his supposed legal superiority, and use the viral moment to establish himself as the premier attorney in Rhode Island. He's even prepared several complex legal arguments, specifically designed to confuse and embarrass Judge Caprio in front of the cameras. What Wellington doesn't realize is that he's about to challenge a man who has been practicing law since before Wellington was born. Judge Caprio has handled over 300,000 cases in his career, written decisions cited by state Supreme Courts, and possesses one of the sharpest legal minds on the East Coast. The compassion that Wellington mistakes for weakness actually stems from decades of legal mastery that allows Caprio to see beyond the technicalities to the human element of justice. The case is called Paramount Development versus Rossetti Construction, and on paper, it seems straightforward. Paramount claims that Rossetti failed to complete a commercial building project on time, and they're seeking $1.2 million in damages for alleged breach of contract. As court begins, Judge Caprio reviews the case file with his characteristic attention to detail. Wellington sits at the plaintiff's table, his $3,000 suit perfectly pressed, his Harvard class ring prominently displayed, and his expression radiating the kind of arrogance that makes experienced attorneys cringe. "Your Honor," Wellington begins, his voice dripping with condescension that's immediately apparent to everyone in the courtroom. "This is a textbook case of contractual breach. My client, Paramount Development, entered into a clear agreement with specific deadlines, and the defendant has flagrantly violated those terms." Judge Caprio looks up from the file, his experienced eyes immediately reading Wellington's body language and tone. "Counselor, please proceed with your argument." Wellington smirks, mistaking the judge's politeness for naivety. "Your Honor, I've prepared a comprehensive analysis based on the landmark Massachusetts case, Morrison versus Hartfield Construction, which clearly establishes the precedential framework for this type of commercial dispute." "Counselor," Judge Caprio interrupts gently, "we're in Rhode Island. Are you citing Massachusetts precedent because there's no applicable Rhode Island case law?" This is exactly the opening Wellington has been waiting for. He's prepared for this moment, convinced that he can use it to demonstrate his superior legal knowledge and embarrass Judge Caprio on television. Wellington stands up dramatically, his voice rising with fake incredulity. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how modern contract law operates in the 21st century." The courtroom falls quiet. Even the camera crew stops moving. Wellington has just insulted Judge Caprio's understanding of the law in front of a packed courtroom and television audience. But Wellington isn't finished with his attack. He's about to make it much worse. Perhaps if this court had more experience with complex commercial litigation, Wellington continues, his voice now openly condescending, there would be an understanding that interstate commerce regulations and federal precedents supersede local interpretations. This isn't a parking ticket dispute, Your Honor. This requires sophisticated legal analysis. The silence that follows is deafening. Wellington has just suggested that Judge Caprio lacks the intelligence and experience to handle complex legal matters. He's attacked not just the judge's competence, but his intellectual capacity to understand modern law. What happens next will become legendary in legal circles and serve as a masterclass in why preparation, respect, and humility matter more than arrogance and ego. Judge Caprio slowly removes his reading glasses, a gesture that veteran court watchers know signals something significant is about to happen. He sets them down with deliberate precision and looks directly at Wellington with the calm, measured expression that has made him both beloved and feared in equal measure. "Mr. Wellington," Judge Caprio says, his voice remaining perfectly calm, "I want to make sure I understand your position correctly. Are you suggesting that this court lacks the sophistication to properly adjudicate your case?" Wellington, emboldened by what he mistakes for uncertainty, doubles down on his disrespect. "Your Honor, I'm simply stating that complex commercial litigation requires an understanding of multi-jurisdictional precedent and federal commerce law. These are concepts that might be beyond the typical scope of municipal court practice." Judge Caprio nods slowly, as if seriously considering Wellington's words. "I see, Mr. Wellington. You mentioned Massachusetts precedent. Before we proceed with your sophisticated arguments, I'd like to ask you a few questions about this specific case." The judge opens a thick legal volume that had been sitting on his desk. "You cited Morrison versus Hartfield Construction. Have you reviewed the Rhode Island case law that might apply to construction contract disputes in this state?" Wellington hesitates. He's been so focused on his prepared federal arguments and his plan to embarrass Judge Caprio that he hasn't thoroughly researched Rhode Island state law. "Your Honor, as I mentioned, federal precedent typically takes precedence in commercial matters." "That's not what I asked, Counselor," Judge Caprio interrupts, his voice still calm, but with an edge that makes everyone in the courtroom pay closer attention. "Have you reviewed Rhode Island General Laws, Title VI, Chapter 13, regarding construction contracts?" Wellington's confident smirk begins to fade. "Your Honor, I believe my federal precedent arguments address the relevant legal framework." "Mr. Wellington," Judge Caprio says, opening his legal book to a specific page, "you're arguing a case in Rhode Island involving Rhode Island contractors under a contract governed by Rhode Island law. Yet you haven't researched the state statutes that directly apply to your case." The arrogance is starting to drain from Wellington's face as he realizes he may have made a serious oversight. But Judge Caprio is just getting started. "Rhode Island General Laws, Title VI, Chapter 13, Section 15 specifically addresses weather-related construction delays." Judge Caprio continues, reading from the book. "It states that delays caused by weather conditions exceeding seasonal averages by more than 15% shall not constitute breach of contract, provided the contractor demonstrates reasonable effort to maintain project timeline." Judge Caprio looks up at Wellington, whose expression has changed from arrogant confidence to genuine concern. "Now, Mr. Wellington, did you review the weather reports for the construction period in question?" "Your Honor, I don't see how weather conditions are relevant to." "Answer the question, Counselor. Did you review the weather reports?" Wellington's mouth opens and closes as he realizes he's walked into a trap of his own making. "No, Your Honor." "But no," Judge Caprio repeats. "You didn't review the weather reports that could provide a statutory defense for your opponent. You didn't research the Rhode Island laws that govern your case. Yet you felt qualified to question this court's understanding of complex legal matters." But Judge Caprio isn't finished. What he reveals next will completely destroy Wellington's case and his credibility. The judge pulls out another document from his file. The National Weather Service reports for the construction period show that rainfall exceeded the seasonal average by 23%. Under Rhode Island law, this constitutes a statutory exemption to breach of contract claims. Wellington's face has gone from confident to pale. He's beginning to realize that his lack of preparation has put him in serious legal jeopardy. Furthermore, "Mr. Wellington," Judge Caprio continues, his voice gaining authority, "you mentioned that this court lacks experience with complex commercial litigation. I'm curious about your own preparation. Did you review the opposing counsel's motion filed 3 days ago? Wellington looks genuinely confused. Your Honor, what motion? Judge Caprio holds up a document. Attorney Sarah Chen, representing the defendant, filed a motion, citing the weather exemption statute I just referenced. This motion has been part of the court record for 3 days. You didn't review it? The courtroom is completely silent as Wellington realizes the scope of his failure. He came prepared to embarrass Judge Caprio with complex legal arguments, but he failed to handle the most basic aspects of case preparation. I'll take your silence as confirmation that you failed to review your opponent's filings, Judge Caprio says. So let me understand this, Mr. Wellington. You came into my courtroom, questioned my intelligence and competence, suggested I lacked the